If you're interested in learning how I launched Zim Excellence, then you're in luck. Sign up for my podcast workshop and learn how it's easier and more affordable than ever to start a podcast. Also, grab yourself a copy of my podcast resource guide, which covers industry terminology, suggested tech setup, in addition to countless free online resources to support your podcast journey. Just head to vongai.com/podcast creation. That's vongai.com/podcast creation. The link will also be down in the show notes. Now, let's start the show. Yo, welcome to the party. Hello, makadini salibonani. My name is Vongai, and you're listening to Zim Excellence, a weekly celebration of Zimbabwe's changemakers and trailblazers. So here's the secret, y'all. Zimbabweans are actually dope AF, and it's just time that we recognize it. So grab yourself a plate of sadza and grab that stony ginger beer, and let the party begin. Welcome to another episode of Zim Excellence. Today, my guest is a mother, mentor, business graduate, and founder of Silkebee Skincare. As featured in Harper's Bazaar, the skincare company formulates products that are safe for babies with eczema and dry skin conditions. Aside from being a business graduate with over 10 years of healthcare regulation experience, she is also a dancer and member of the ZimThrive committee. However, out of them all, her most treasured gift is the gift of motherhood to two beautiful girls, and we actually do have a special guest with us here today who's decided to tag along. So please welcome Nyasha Matanda.
Thank you. And this is Zuma Ray. I'm going to put it back. That's Zuma. So yeah.
For the listeners who can't see, because I only record audio so far, that she came by camera and she was looking hella gorgeous and ready for her close up. She's fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm so happy that you're here. It's going to be a party. And speaking of, I have to get this out of the way because it's important that the listeners know. So besides both of us being fabulous, amazing Zimbabwean women, accomplished Zimbabwean women, we are both dancers. Mm-hmm. However, I feel like you're the dancer who does all the moves and the choreography and all the pop locking. But I'm the dancer who's at the function who's like, ooh, this is my song, this is my jam. And I run to the dance floor and I just do whatever I want to do. So I felt it was important that I should share that. We're both dancers, but we're different.
I think there's a dancer locked in every single being.
Yeah, I think especially being Zimbabweans, there are always these functions. So it's like you'll have those relatives being like, Imi, where mutambe? And they're like pushing the kids to dance, even if they don't want to dance. My mom jokes, and because I'm from the Spice Girl generation, I tend to age myself every episode. I don't know why I do this to myself, but yes, I'm from the Spice Girls generation. And my mom was just like, yeah, you used to dance like a white girl, and I taught you how to dance.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm from the Spice Girls generation.
Well, see, I still think it was still dancing. And I think there's a dancer locked in each and every single one of us, but it's specifically as Africans, because it's part of our history. It's part of how we used to pray, how we used to connect to God. So it's whatever way you're going to do it, it's locked in there some way, somehow.
That is so true. I actually never thought of it that way. So
yeah.
Thank you for that powerful reminder. Anyway, so first things first, I'd love to talk origin story with you because you are a Zim Excellence superhero, and every superhero has their origin story. So I know you now live in the United Kingdom. Yes. Where were you born?
So I was born in Vuyanehanda Hospital.
Yes, I was born in Vuyanehanda Hospital.
I was born in Vuyanehanda Hospital, and
Legends only, y'all. Legends only.
So my parents actually met here in the UK. So they were here during colonization. and they were friends from back then. In fact, they used to raise money towards the liberation struggle. They used to get together in committees and raise money towards the liberation struggle. So as soon as independence hit, they were like, we're out, we're going back. And that's how I was made. So that's where I grew. I was born, and I've been back and forth to the UK ever since.
Okay, so how'd you get from being born in Buena Hospital, legends only, y'all, legends only, to being a fabulous mentor, business graduate, mother supreme, and skincare CEO, fabulous lady in the United Kingdom? How do we get from point A to point B?
It's a long story, but I'll try and give you a bit of a snapshot. But so as I explained, so my mum moved back, and she became the first environmental health Black female environmental health officer, and she actually inspected before they opened up SEM levies. So she gave SEM levies the go ahead to open up and be fabulous and do what they need to do. But she was, like I said, she was always back and forth for education, but she decided to move back here when I was about 14. And so we moved back. I mean, obviously, also the economy in Zim wasn't the greatest at the time. I did my education, and then when it came to sort of choosing degrees and so forth, I did want to do something creative, but I'm African and you don't do that. So I ended up doing an LLB with business degree, and I went to London and did that. Got a job as once I'd finished, I couldn't find a decent enough job, but I found myself in healthcare regulation. So I started with the osteopaths, and I used to work in fitness to practice, kind of looking at cases where maybe patients hadn't been treated fairly, and investigations into practitioners who were a bit unscrupulous. So that's how my experience started with the osteopaths, and then I went to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, same thing, to protecting the public from unscrupulous nurses and midwives, and worked for NHS litigation for a bit. And then now I work for the regulator for hospitals, so independent hospitals and NHS hospitals. Now, when I had my first baby, this is like now more the extra bits, the entrepreneurial side was always inbuilt because of my LLB with business degree. When I had my first baby, she had really bad eczema, and we'd taken her to the hospitals, took her to the GP. They gave emollients. They gave all the emollients under the sun. They weren't working until the doctor said to me, okay, I'm going to give her a steroid. And I was like, whoa.
To a baby?
Right. 6 months old. How is that going to work? I said to myself, there has to be something else. And I remember kind of reading up about sort of natural remedies and trying to think about implementing that into her routine. And what basically happened was, because I'd actually gone natural myself, I've been chemically straightening my hair for years and years and years. And I think a few years back, I thought, you know what? I'm going to learn how to do my hair. YouTube is there. Everything's going on. Shea Moisture is there. I'm going to figure this out. Me and Shea Moisture are going to do this. So I kind of looked at the coconut oils, and I thought, okay, let me just start using this on her skin. Yeah, so that's when I just figured what works. Coconut oil is great for itchy skin. Shea butter is great for cell turnover. Beeswax is great for kind of protecting the skin from any allergens. Putting that all together, I got my first balm, which was the baby balm. I used to go to mum and baby groups, and the other mums were asking, what did you use and so forth. But luckily, my mum had gotten me a book called How to Make Your Hobby a Business, something along those lines. I have to look at it again. But it was basically detailing how you can't actually just give natural skincare, even as a present and stuff. If you make it in your kitchen, you can't just hand it out. So you have to get it cosmetically tested. So I thought, if I'm going to get it cosmetically safety tested, I might as well make my money back somehow. No, I'm on maternity leave. I'm going to make this, and I've always wanted a business. Maybe this is it. So that's what I did. Got it cosmetically safety tested, and created my business dream that I've always had. I've had it since I was 10. I was like, I want to be a business person because then I can do charitable stuff. So that was my thing. Yeah, that's how it started. And now the business is up and running. It's been up and running for about 6 years now. And then the dancing has always been a thing that I've enjoyed doing. So I went to the Dominican convent, Harare. And I used to...
That's the school that I didn't get into. And my father, who's a Catholic, was devastated. And my mom was like, no worries, she'll get into Arundel. And I got into Arundel. And I was only there for 2 years and moved to China. Hey, take that.
Yeah, convent was a little picky, wasn't it? I think it helped it probably helped that I had a Scottish accent because I'd started school in the UK and I went there and the headmistress was Scottish. So I was there, I was like, you know, a bit of slight nepotism there, girl. So that helped, you know. So I used to do ballet, but then obviously on the weekends at the parties, you know, you're there dancing kasa kasa and stuff like that. Dancing to, you know, to rumba with people and your mom and stuff like that. And I was so competitive then. And then it turned into, you know, at home it was that thing where as a teenager, if I was, you know, in a mood or whatever, I'll go upstairs, put on Destiny's Child and be like singing, I'm a survivor, or whatever else.
Yes, obviously. And S Club 7, because why not?
So it became my comfort. It became my release. It became my go-to place. And then at uni, it was up in the club. I would be battling, popping, locking, and doing performances here and there at variety shows. And then once I became a professional woman, it was obviously Friday night drinks, Saturday night in the club or whatever. Same thing, same MO. And I was like, after I had my daughter, and it was when I was going through a split with her father, and I started having certain weekends or time when she was away, and I was like, what is it that I enjoyed? Became a healing thing because I was like, what are the things that I loved to do before? What were the things that I would, you know, that healing, that inner child?
Yeah.
What is it that I love to do? What is it that comes naturally to me? And why am I not doing that as a career?
It's so interesting you bring that up because I just finished up this 16-week mindset course, literally like changed my life, got in through a diversity scholarship. So I did it for free. And we had like this 1 week where you had to reconnect back with your inner child and just like writing letters and forgiveness work and unworthiness stuff and meditations. And it's just so interesting that the stuff that you did as a child, you eventually come back to as an adult. Like the child just knows, the outside world and maybe parents and school or whatever, or just like society can push you away to say, no, don't go down that path. It's scary. It's uncertain. It's this. But then the child just knows. I want to head back to our holistic health kind of thing that we touched on.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting that you brought up that you went on a hair journey and that kind of convinced you to be like, oh, let me actually start making learn how to do hair and maybe make my own products. And that's what ended up helping out your child. So I actually feel particularly drawn to you because your skincare is natural. And y'all, make this a drinking game in case we keep saying natural throughout this whole conversation. Anyway, so my own holistic health journey started in 2011 with my hair because I was relaxed since I was about 3 and I didn't know what my hair looked like. And I just come out of hospital and I just kind of had some downtime, stumbled onto like the natural hair movement section of YouTube and just went down a whole rabbit hole of learning what lye does, sodium hydroxide and these different chemicals and the fact that hair straightening then comes from this idea of a slavery, like being as light as a brown paper bag or having a comb pass through your hair and then you'd be free, all of that stuff. And I remember after hair, it then took off and I started looking into what's in our makeup, what's in our skincare, and then basically any products I could use on my hair, teeth, and skin. And I was keeping a diary. And as I learned about like different ingredients and how they affect me, especially my body and my hair history, it was just so illuminating. Like, oh, wait, why is this? And just seeing the correlation and like seeing also the science behind it. Like, for instance, parabens in deodorant or just parabens in general and how they've linked that towards cancer or just hormone disrupting chemicals and all of that. So you've already partially answered this, but I wanted to ask, like, you know, when did you first feel drawn towards natural products, holistic health, and also environmental sustainability? Because I believe like the packaging for your products is recyclable, which is amazing, especially because people forget because we're in like a million different pandemics, but we are still in a climate crisis.
Yes.
So please reduce, reuse, and recycle if you can, and if you can afford to.
Probably in my mid-20s. It was when
She's still in her 20s though, y'all.
Like, that was
we don't age
week.
ourselves on the show. I'm still a teenager. She's in her 20s.
In my mid-20s last week.
Yes.
I similarly had the same, you know, sentiment in terms of not knowing how to style my hair. And I remember when I started to get the new growth in, when you relax your hair, I would just be sitting there and like constantly touching it and almost falling in love with the new growth and thinking, oh, I gotta straighten it now and I don't want to do it. And
because it was like curly, right? It was like soft and curly. I literally did not know what my hair looked like until I started that journey. And everyone was like, what are you doing? You can do your hair. You can do braids. Like there was this whole thing about if you go natural, it means you do braids or you wear wigs. And I'm like, what? Who said that?
Don't need to do that. So that was when I finally decided to actually take that natural journey, it was under literally echo the same sentiment of actually just taking my own identity back and getting to know who I am. And girl, I was getting burnt because I was like, you know, the burn when you
I lost hair at the front of my head, and it was like from braids, from how tight they would make them, because they would take the teeny hairs and then put them into braids when they don't need to. They're baby hairs. Let them be babies, or just let them be short. And it was only, I think, between 4 or 6 months into my natural hair journey that it started to grow back. And I would have like my ninis and different aunts being like, "Oh, you have hair there? That's amazing!" Because for them, it's like it's gone. For most people, it was gone. And it's
alopecia for life. It is what it is. You know, we lose our hair at the front, and that's it. Pop a wig on and cover it up. You know, and keep going. So, but my in terms of climate change and so forth, I was always aware of that because my mom was like I said, the first Black female environmental health officer in Harare. So even back home in Zim, you know, you'll see people like chucking stuff out of their cars, and my mom would be like, "What's that? Do you know what I mean?" She'd be like, "I can't believe it. These people don't understand." And she'll go and inspect places like Mbare, and you know, trying to raise awareness in terms of just the sewage systems and so forth, and you know, pollution and just people dumping things here, there, and everywhere. I was always aware and alert with regards to that. So moving to England, it was just a continuation, and then I think it peaked to a different level when obviously my daughter, at that time I was living in London. I mean, London's very polluted. The levels of pollution in London are very, very high. So in terms of just discovering her allergies and understanding what it was that was triggering them, was it, you know, what was in the food? What was in my detergents? Where I'm staying, yes, it's a flat, but it's a building that's been split into 3 different flats. So therefore, there's loads of UV rays from everyone having a different internet provider. Little things like that, you know, and people kind of speaking about, oh yeah, I went to Zimbabwe and then my child's eczema went. Yeah, because the internet is one place and the garden is the other place and the child is outside most of the time. So understanding all of that return to nature and actually nurturing nature and nurturing our environment is where we need to go, because, well, we've been needing to go there. And it's just a continuation, like I said, from my life, it's been a whole lifelong awareness. And it just literally peaked with the birth of my first. I think after that, after a while, I tended to actually start moving into the country. Now I live in a small village in Staffordshire, where at some point I lived in Essex so I live near farms and stuff, where the air, you walk, the air literally does not smell like pollution, and it doesn't feel like you're suffocating as you're just like walking down the street. And you can take a jog without your eyes watering.
Yeah. Today is a great day to start your own podcast. Whether you have a message you want to share with the world, or you think, ooh, it could be fun to have my own talk show like Vongai, getting started is easier than ever. Here at Zim Excellence, we use Buzzsprout, which is hands down the easiest, most affordable, and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Start for free and list your show on directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more within minutes. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and the team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping and teaching you to succeed. Just check out their YouTube videos. They are filled with tons of information. So join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Sign up today using the link in the show notes or go to vongai.com/podcast creation, and you'll get a $20 credit if you sign up for a paid plan. It also helps support the show. So go ahead, sign up for Buzzsprout, and keep me posted on your new podcast. Now back to the show. Right. It makes a huge difference. In New York, I live right by this big park, and then there's like the Hudson River, and it's just like my happy place to be near trees and water, and it just makes me so happy.
So that's where my awareness peaked, was after the birth of my daughter. But in terms of understanding the environment and knowing about that, because of my mother, I was always aware of it.
I believe you use coconut oil, shea butter, peppermint, which is my favorite. And no, you don't use rosemary. For some reason, I'm putting that on you, but that's in my hair products. But like when you're sourcing the ingredients, like where are you sourcing them from? And do you have like good relationships with the people or the communities that you're getting them from?
At the moment, I'm quite a small business, and I source locally. They might have gotten some of the products from, especially if it's shea butter, they've gotten it from Ghana and so forth. But I source locally because then I can guarantee the integrity of my products, because then it's certified for sort of UK standard. And also it's less transportation from sort of saying, oh, it's coming from all the way from Ghana to come to here. And so I have suppliers within the UK that I use. Anyway, so the products that I source, I use suppliers that are local, just in terms of transportation and emissions and so forth. Then it keeps those down. My dream obviously would be to be able to start to have links within Africa, and actually maybe production within Africa. So then again, you're just keeping things local, but also creating jobs for disenfranchised people and so forth. So that's where I'm kind of looking at things and so forth, and looking at my distribution line and so forth. But sourcing is local because I want to guarantee quality of the products and the standard of the products, until I can obviously say I'm going into Ghana and I'm meeting wonderful women who make the shea butter or the coconut oil and so forth, and I'm bringing it in myself. At the moment it's local. How many times I say local?
Drink.
Did y'all hear local? I said local.
We endorse drinking water, people.
Yes.
Water. Drink your water. It's good for you.
Please. Yes.
So earlier you were talking about how, people would say their children's eczema disappeared as soon as they went to Zimbabwe because, being outside is so crucial. I don't want to generalize this, but certain generations or like modern day living has had people kind of shunning indigenous practices, or just like old family remedies that people know work. It's always this like, oh, why would I do that when I can go into the pharmacy and take this thing or whatever, right? But and then people are shocked when, it's appropriated and it turns into the latest fad and we're all doing it. But it was like, no, it is something we've done. I wanted to touch on the fact that I know that your mom then reminded you that what you were doing is what your grandmother did in Bulawayo, right?
Yeah. So that day, oh my gosh, it was that thing where obviously I think my mom would look at me like a bit of a freak, bless her, because she was like, because my grandmother's dead, y'all. And she passed when I was 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's not like she sat me down and said, my darling, this is how we do it, and this is how you make healing products, and da-da-da-da-da. And I have to say, it was an act of God. It was an act of divine, and it's so humbling. So I remember Mum kind of giving me the book and show and telling me, oh yeah, so here's a book, have a read about how to turn your hobby into a business. I know you've always wanted to do some sort of business-minded something, even though she never really approved in kind of being, she was very kind of academia, but she was like, okay, you and your business, here's the book, go read it, figure it out. And then she said to me, this is what my mom used to do. My mom was creative and she could sew, she could cook. My grandmother had 11 children. She was married for over 50 years and she was just that quintessential homemaker. And obviously just figuring out that it was a situation where somehow, some way beyond, that gift has now translated and has come to me. And I now have a responsibility to delve into more of the knowledge and so forth. So my grandparents had farms in Gokwe, but they used to live in Pilandaba in Bulawayo. So they would travel to the farms and so forth, and they had workers and everything, which was quite different during colonization, but somehow they did it. So they would get, their produce from the farms and so forth. And my grandmother would obviously come back home, make stuff, and then they would have a farm shop within the township in Pilandaba, and she would get, obviously having used the produce from her farm, and she would make soaps and creams and so forth, and people just would go to her if there were issues. And she was big within, she was a woman, as they call Mukadzwe, that the women who wear the uniform in church and stuff like that. So she was all the way connected to God, all the way kind of blessed within her marriage and had loads of children. And yeah, that's just how she lived. So she's, she pops up in dreams and so on and so forth. So she makes
that.
Yeah, she's definitely, a guardian angel. And I'm definitely appreciative of that, of her. But then finding out that I come from a long line of healers in that sense. And obviously it's been demonized, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So trying to accept that and trying to learn what that means for me, who I am, and how I will then carry on, and how then I will teach my 2 little girls and whoever else, if I have any more children, their heritage and carry that line on.
This idea of passing traditions across different generations.
Right.
Which is beautiful, which isn't like this thing that you set out to do. It's just this thing that you then learned about.
Yeah.
I forget where I heard this from, but I heard this thing that, when you look back in your family history, you then tend to find someone else who had similar gifts to you, or who you're drawn to. This idea of doing that ancestry work and healing ancestral trauma and generational trauma, because certain lessons are karmic lessons. So then they come back again and again. Right. And I've just been so curious because a lot of people in my family are in the nursing industry in the UK and got some family in South Africa. And then my parents, like my mom's an environmental lawyer, my dad's a diplomat. To my knowledge, I am the first artist, the first, not the last artist in my family. But I'm like, there has to have been someone else. And who was this person? And how many generations ago was it? And which line was it on? Was it on both lines? I don't know. But I did learn my paternal grandfather, who I never met. I think he died when my dad was in his 20s, was really good with languages. And I've always been really drawn to languages. So I find that connection there. And then my maternal grandfather was left-handed, but then he was forced to write with his right, and I'm left-handed.
Right. So
yeah.
They would have had their creative gifts built in, and being forced to write with the right hand is obviously sort of stamping that out.
So I'm curious. I'm like, who's the other actor? Like, you know, or like, because if we're talking like we're going back generations, actor wasn't a thing. It would have been the person who told the jokes or the stories or wrote the stories or whatever within the community and passed them down.
So that was one thing that my mum was telling me about, is that when they would go to the farm, they would all sit around the fire or whatever else and sit down and, you know, and my grandmother would tell them Ngano stories, basically. So that would have been inbuilt within our culture as it is anyway. You know, you'd go to that older Mbuya or Sekuru or whatever, and they would tell you the stories. And that's what I'm saying, that's what this podcast means to me. These are the Nganos, these are the stories, because we don't sit down with our kids and kind of say, okay, come, darling, come, let us sit down and I'll tell you a Ngano. And they're like, Mommy, what's a Ngano? And, right? We don't.
Yeah.
We don't.
I didn't even have my parents tell me Ngano. I think it was like when I went to, I guess y'all would call it junior school, when I went to primary school here in Zimbabwe, and then you're learning there's Tsumo and Ngano and something else. And I'm like, what are these things? It was in Shona class.
Yes.
And then I come home with homework.
Yes.
Yeah, Matni Mikira, which like as a word scared me. Yeah. I always felt so intimidated because Shona. So my two Zimbabwean parents grew up speaking Shona to me, but I would reply back to them in English, in my British accent. My accent used to be super duper, like British London posh. Like it confused people, confused black people, confused white people. They're like, where are you from? Why you sound like that? Anyway, so I would reply back in English. And I actually did not know I was doing this until we moved to Beijing, and all my friends who I went to an international school were like, why is it that your parents talk to you in like a different language, but you reply back in English? And I'm like, wait, I do that? But anyway, to go back. So it was when I was in Shona class. This was just like Shona class for everyone. But when I was at Arundel, I was in Shona L2 because technically Shona is my third language, because I spoke English first in the UK, learned French, and then like coming back here and then learning the Shona that I knew wasn't real Shona, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, so it was like a whole thing for me. And I would come home with my Shona homework and be like, what does this mean? I need help with things like these really obscure proverbs, like a monkey doesn't swing from a tree. Like stuff that you can't even translate. You just kind of have to do it in your mind. Right. You can't put it in English. You kind of have to make sense of it in the language, which is like, you know, similar with French. You do that. And I had one teacher who wanted us to buy Kwayedza, which is the Shona newspaper. Yes. And my mom would drive everywhere around this city, and my dad, and they'd be like, we cannot find this newspaper. Why does your teacher need class? But it's we're probably going off a tangent here because it's me. That's what I do. But it's funny, we joke about this, and at the same time, like, there is this serious conversation of preserving these different indigenous languages, especially because I believe there are like 11 in the Zimbabwean constitution. And I was like, I thought there were only 2, like 3. Right. I thought it was like English, Shona, and Ndebele. It's like, no, there's Ndau, and there's this, and Venda. And yeah, this idea of like, we need to be preserving these languages. And everything is in English, which is good on one hand because it allows people from different tribes to communicate. But then on the other hand, it doesn't really help with learning these languages. I had this conversation with a former guest, well, a previous guest, Yewe Sibanda. She wrote the book, my first book of Shona and Ndebele words. And I was telling her when I moved over to Harare from London, this idea of, I had a lot of relatives and just a lot of Zimbabweans coming to my parents, were coming at me like, ha tauri Shona, and this. And we change as people every 7 years. So around like 7, we're starting to make sense of how the world works, like differences, whether it's gender or racism or whatever. And so it was very just clear to me that like, oh, I'm different. And it's almost being perceived as a bad thing. And because I'm constantly hearing Hatari Shana, the way it was being said was almost like out of a place of shaming. And so then it made me, as that 8-year-old girl, just want to rebel and say, well, I don't want to learn this language anyway, you know? But I love that we're coming into this beautiful time where we have these great resources to empower our children to learn Shona and Ndebele or any other language under the sun in a way that's cool, that's like, oh, this makes you unique. This like gives you the upper hand. And also just for the fun little thing of like, you can gossip with your family members in public. You can cuss someone out and they won't know. Like, what are your thoughts on raising multicultural and multilingual children, and also knowing there's, you know, this idea of they're first generation technically, right? They'd be like first generation. What are your thoughts on that?
It weighs on me quite a bit, and my thing is I will just have to ensure that they go home as much as I can possibly take them home and immerse them in the culture and the way of life and the language, because obviously kids pick up the language quite quickly. That's what I'm going to do. But even just this morning, obviously my little one will listen to, sometimes I'll put on YouTube Cocomelon, and obviously Cocomelon has nursery rhymes or sing along together. But today I was like looking and I found, same sort of quality and everything. I found nursery rhymes in Shona, ones that I didn't even know myself. Yeah, and I was like,
oh I love that. So I don't know any. I'm learning.
Right. So my 6-year-old comes in and she was like, oh, I've never heard of this one. And, and I was like, yeah. And I know she gets these moments where she really wants to learn the language. So I've got books in Shona. I've got, wherever I've seen books, there's one Toko Vuga Vuga, and she's an ex-convent girl.
From Sunrise, right?
Yeah, Sunrise, yeah. So I've got Toko Vuga, and then I've got another one, I think it's basic Shona words. I think the lady's here in the UK, so I've got that one. So my 6-year-old learns, and she'll be like, Mummy, what does that mean? And what does this mean? And she'll be like, Wana, shush, Wana. And Mana's just looking up at her like,
I love that. Like, I said this to you before, before we were recording, that I am the adult version of your kids. Because even though I didn't have these like empowering resources that I'm talking about, my parents still did, the best job that they could. And like my mom, when she was dressing me, she'd be like, si maoko and kumbo and all of that. But like, she tells me these stories of like the Shona I would speak, where I would just be like, so you know how pisa means hot,
right.
So I think maybe I didn't want to like, I wanted to touch the stove. You know how kids are just like, they get to that age, I forget what age it is, where they're just exploring and they want to like feel and touch and just all of the senses and just, I want to understand this because they're so curious. Right. And I think my nini who lived with us at the time wanted to make sure that I didn't touch the stove because I would burn myself. Right. So she would say, pizza, hot, like telling me like, it's hot, don't do it. Yeah. And so I then ended up just calling things pizza hot. Like there was like hot was its own level, and then pizza hot is like the next level. Until this day, sometimes I like do it. I'm like, oh, it's pizza hot. And I'm like, wait, what are you saying? Like, I'll stop myself and I'm like, do you know you're saying hot, hot? Like,
It's hot. Mm.
yeah, my mom's like, you are a weird child.
Yeah, you are literally my daughters in the future. Do try and speak as much Shona, obviously, to them. And these are some of the things, obviously, with their developmental stages where you're speaking to the health visitors, they'll ask, is there a second language, because that might slow speech and and it's all those things where you're like, oh, okay, so I must, I'll just stick to English and then Shona will come later. And that's kind of what I did with my first. But it was my second. I'm trying more and more to kind of just be like, okay, dude, I'm gonna speak to you in Shona. And when Mum comes around to help me and stuff like that, she's there, like, speaking to in Shona and stuff, and then you hear her saying things like kaka, kaka, and she knows that gogo is gogo, and both of them know that gogo is gogo. So, and my 6-year-old, when they do different like show and tells, of like, me and my gogo did this, and then the teachers are like, gogo? It's like, yeah, my gogo. Is that your grandmother? No, it's my gogo. This is like
I love that we all have our words. There's like yaya and gogo and abuela and grand-mère. Yeah.
So I will try as much as possible. What helps is that obviously there's books and there's cartoons coming out and there's things, and I love that, because growing up there weren't black cartoons, were they, on TV? We're watching things like Voltron. I don't know what era you're from, but I was watching things like Voltron and Captain Planet, and I did not really see any black faces on there. And I love the fact that my daughter can be like, Mommy, she looks like me, Jojo and Gran, which is on BBC. She'll be like, oh my God, she looks like me. Whereas now I'm starting to find the Shona cartoons and stuff like that, and the Shona nursery rhymes and stuff. And I'm just going to instill as much as I possibly can. That's all I can do, and have that opening at home. So see, Mum still has property in Zim, and maybe maintain that and keep that and be able to go home, and if not home, then South Africa, and kind of keep some sort of indigenous language and identity going as much as possible. That's something I'm going to try.
That.
Yeah.
The only black animation that comes to mind is Little Bill.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, Little Bill.
Yeah.
But then but otherwise, as far as, because I also was on what's it, CBBC, the children's BBC, growing up. I think there was like Rasta Rat or Rasta Cat or something.
Yes,
which now I think about it may have been racist. Like, Rasta Mouse.
He was still on there. So, yeah, I don't know if he's on there anymore, but he was on there with my 6-year-old. Rasta Mouse, yeah.
Yeah, because like at the time I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. He's like Jamaican, he skateboards. But now I'm like, why are we using the term Rasta? Right. And why is he a mouse?
Right.
What are we trying to say?
Right,
Yeah. So I'm like, was it racist? How have you been able to practice your culture and cultivate a sense of community, whether it's like Zimbabwean community or just like your community of mums to support you, or the community of like from the beauty industry and the beauty bloggers and all that stuff. Fun fact, I was a hair blogger once upon a time. Yeah, and I'd go to, what's that event? It was called like Beauty something live, and it would happen during bank holiday.
Yeah,
I forget what it was called.
Yeah, it was. I'll come back to that. Is it? It's not Shades of Beauty live? Is it not? I can't remember.
No, it was like beauty and hair something live. It was like a huge big expo, and at the time I thought it was so great because they had the hair people from America.
Yeah, of course.
And then they also had local UK people. Yeah.
My community, I've got a lot of communities, a lot of little bits.
Good for you, girl.
Bits of community. And so ZimThrive is one of my communities, sort of Zim diasporans doing their best to try and, do whatever we can to either invest in Zimbabwe. Over the COVID period, money was raised to pay for nurses within Paranyatwa, supplies, to send supplies of for COVID. In terms of the music industries, we've got some, Zimbabwean music execs who work here in England who are working with artists and showcasing artists, up and coming talent. So we just everywhere, business.
They're the Illuminati. I'm joking.
Oh God.
They're everywhere. They're listening right now. They're in my house. I'm scared.
We've got
Go ahead, girl.
We've got actresses within, we've got actresses within ZimThrive. So that's the wider community. But people are in Dubai, where they're in America, they're in Australia, they're in China, and we find ways of corresponding and working together, all in the hopes of one day, COVID allowing, doing the month-long festival and actually literally being on the ground in Zim and collaborating and working and showcasing the talent that we have. We've got journalists within BBC, and so that's one community. I'm on the arts team, and as I mentioned earlier with the dancing, when I eventually started going to master classes and stuff in London, some of the dancers for choreographers for Wizkid and so forth, and Childish Gambino, Sherry Silva, went to her masterclass, and she was just like, just start. It doesn't matter how old you are, just dance, just put yourself on YouTube, put yourself out there. You don't know what will come of it. If this is something that you've always wanted to do, just do it. And that's how I just started popping myself on Instagram, and through doing that, that's how I was called to the arts team for ZimThrive. That's how that worked. And then my community, in terms of just being Zimbabwean, my mom, having been here in the 70s, she still has friends. I've got loads of family, her siblings are all, she's got quite a few siblings here. So there's a massive community of cousins and family and friends of the family from back then. The people just that have just stayed in touch and have become family for me. And trying to, another thing of sort of the maybe just the more local communities that, that Zimbabwean shop that we go to, and we get, my daughter loves sadza, so we'll go get sadza there, and we'll go and get cream soda and she loves it. So she's like, oh, can I have sadza today, and this, that, and the other. And yeah, so there is still some sort of identity and community for her, and having loads of sort of cousins and friends of families, children who are the same age, who are Zimbabwean as well. There's a lot of that understanding. And then my natural skincare community is more sort of when I go to, like I was saying, to Shades of Beauty Live was a skincare community, the hair care community. I sort of made my friends there, or made my fellow natural skincare entrepreneurs or makers. And I don't know if you've heard of Mawuyu, where they use
so as I call myself a detective. People are like, you're a journalist. And I'm like, no, I don't use that label. I'm a detective. So as I'm scrolling through your little Insty, to brainstorm some really good questions to ask you, I saw a picture of you guys together at an event, and I was like, oh, what is this? And then I started following them, and I was like, oh, cool. Hair care. I want to learn more about them. Yeah. So I'm always really surprised about, how much we're doing as Zimbabweans and how spread out we are. And I guess I'm redefining what it means to be Zimbabwean and where Zimbabweans are allowed to show up. I'll blow my mind and be like, wait, there's a Zimbabwean surgeon? Oh, there's Zimbabwean making skincare? There's Zimbabwean hair care lines? There's a wine company? And that is what made me start this podcast. Because I'm just like, there's so many of us doing so many amazing, great things and inspiring things. They don't even have to be at the huge, famous, highly recognized level. It can even be, very small, indie. But I would discuss this with other people or other Zimbabweans, and people would be like, no, I don't know about that or this or this. And I'm like, we need to find some sort of way to showcase that. And it's so interesting, that you have these groups and initiatives like ZimThrive or the team at Maiden's Way. And just there's a group on Instagram called Incorporate Zim who reached out to me. I forget, but there's so much happening that I'm like, it's a lot to keep track of, but it's great that it's happening because everyone has their own audience. But I just wanted something for myself to kind of find a way to, like you said before we started recording, an archive of our stories, and also a way to show and record and a place, like one place to go to see representation.
Right.
To be like, oh, I want to be inspired, or, oh, I want to see what's possible for me. I'm waiting for the day that I find out there's a Zimbabwean astronaut somewhere. Like, I'm just waiting for that day.
I think
yeah.
There's no limit now.
My friends, I hope you enjoyed part 1, but before you go ahead and click play on part 2, please, please, please go ahead, click that subscribe button, rate, review, and once you're done, meet me back for part 2.